Okay, for Rider, my general recommendation is pick an era and start with the first one. Generally, I will recommend Double or 01 just because they're a little more modern. So 01 is accessible through Shout Factory now, but if you don't care about that sort of thing, just those are more modern and a little more condensed, so I think they're just a slightly lower barrier for entry, but Kuga is absolutely wonderful. Absolutely would recommend as a first, or if you're into the really campy, like 70s stuff, like if you know someone who just really loves old Godzilla and somehow isn't into other tokusatsu, like Rider 1, again, accessible completely through Shout Factory, also Kuga. So 3 out of the 4 available completely legally through Shout Factory, but any of those I think are a great starting point for Kamen Rider. For Sentai, it's a little more complicated. I generally recommend Deca Ranger just because that allows you to adapt to the Sentai team dynamic without having to deal with the villain team dynamic or the Sentai versus villain dynamic, just because it does not have a consistent recurring villains that the Deca Rangers are actively fighting against. Abrera is usually kind of in the shadows until the end of the show. I think Ryu Soldier is also a really good starting point, just because it's a really smooth series to get through. There is not a lot of complex dynamics, and I think it is really a very, very good Sentai. I think it would be a good starter. Shinkenger is probably a good starter. I think it's maybe a little too complex and a little too culturally nuanced. But if you know someone who is like really into Chambara and samurai films and then wanted to get into like Sentai, you know, of course that's a great place to start. Usually with Sentai, I kind of take the person's interests into consideration and be like, okay, what are you into and how can we like pivot you into Sentai from that? But if you kind of have a blank slate and you don't really have anything to go off of, Deca Ranger, Ryu Soldier, if you want something a little more modern, I think are